Krishna. Umakyanatibandasya Tinansma Slakya Saksvan Vilitam Yena Tasmai Shikurave Namah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
My humble obeisance to everyone, except all glories to Srila Prabhupada. So today we will continue with chapter 13.
Recording in progress.
We'll continue with chapter 13. Hamsa Avatar answers the questions of the sons of Brahma. Last time we discussed the first 25 verses. Does anyone remember something from last lesson? Something significant you remember? Whatever you remember, please share. Yes, Mother Sitarani.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I remember that Hamsavatar, the four Kumaras start asking questions when Hamsavatar appears. And they ask, who are you? And Hamsavatar actually chastises them in a way in 3 verses where he says that if you think I am same as you, if you have an impersonalistic view that you are soul, I am soul, then anyway this query doesn't make any sense. And if you think I am a material body, then that also doesn't make any sense. And if you think I'm the Supreme Lord, then why are you really asking this question? So in this way, he chastises, and after that, we discussed how they actually rephrase their question, that they want to know how the mind can be separated from the senses, and how the mind is polluted by the senses.
Mm-hmm.
And we discussed that because their primary process is meditation, so that's the reason they are more interested in knowing how the mind can be kept in such a pure state. And then Hamsavatar starts answering their queries by saying that it cannot really be separated. The only way to do so is by performing devotional service, and he's continuing to answer that. That's what we were reading last time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That is a nice summary of the last part we discussed. But in the beginning, we discussed another subject matter in the beginning of this chapter. Someone remember something about that?
Importance of mode of goodness.
Yes, the mode of goodness. Yeah. Can someone else have some points, please? Why is the mode of goodness important?
He says that the mode of goodness is very useful because it gives rise to religious principles which are favorable for cultivation to bhakti. And then when we're in the mode of goodness, we're able to make proper choices. And then, so that's the fruit of the mode of goodness, is that religious life and values automatically arise by which one can practice the principles, the items of bhakti.
Yeah, it's a fertile ground for dharma. And when religious principles are followed, then devotional service can also flourish. So and then we heard about many things we should do to cultivate the mode of goodness. Can someone else tell me some of these points? What's important to cultivate the mode of goodness? Yes, Swam Jyoti Krishna, please.
Right. Basically, if you try and get out of the modes of ignorance and passion and move on to good, that's a step forward. It is it's in the right direction.
Yeah.
We are mostly the three strings, of a puppeteer. If it keeps going down into ignorance and passion, then we will stay there, because we like to stay in the goodness, in the ignorance and passion. So if we try and raise ourselves to the mode of goodness, it's a better platform towards going to the next call, Vasudha Sutva.
Yes. Yes,
Vasudha
because in goodness, that's right, we can understand transcendental knowledge. Transcendental knowledge is we can understand what will help us to develop love of God. But then in this purport, Srila Prabhupada, in one purport of text 6, Srila Prabhupada makes 15 points how to cultivate a mode of goodness. Very practical. Someone remembers some of these points? So, yes, Mother Sitaran.
I remember about getting up before 4 o'clock. And I also remember how your Guru Maharaj used to give that instruction and devotees used to wake up at 3:55. And also Prabhupada says that by associating with people, who are not really attached to the material world, who are not in lower modes, one cultivates goodness. And by meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this way he gives many points, Maharaj.
Yeah, many points. A simple point I remember is one should accept pure water for quenching thirst. No need for 7-Up. And so, but, and cleaning the body. Just associate with persons who are cultivating detachment from the world. That rising up at 4 o'clock in the morning, that this time should not be wasted in frivolous or materialistic activities. It's very practical. You should learn to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. You're still trying that. So follow the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. So many points out there. And then we spoke out about a term, guna vyatyaya. Srila Prabhupada said, the term guna vyatyaya indicates, what does it indicate? Do you remember what it indicates?
It means that the body is the body is basically a product of the three modes of material nature. And those modes are always changing.
Yes, it's generated by an unstable relationship with the three modes of material nature. And that's there because of our previous material desires and actions. We get a certain body that so good. There was one interesting question also in that section, that the sense objects are entering the mind, and the question was, how can we break that relationship? You remember about that? How can it be broken? So what's the answer?
When we get a higher taste?
One gets a higher taste. That
if you are chanting nicely or you are in a kirtan, you're not going to think about the material side of it. You'll be absorbed in Krishna consciousness.
That's true, that's a nice method, but we are speaking about Jnana here. Jnana. What is Sitarani?
Maharaj, was it acts of transcendental knowledge?
we spoke about that as a method, yes. If you have transcendental knowledge, you understand, we said, if you understand you are not a mind, that then you bring the mind under control of the intelligence, higher intelligence, Krishna conscious knowledge. That, yes, that is also a method, but from the knowledge we get here from this chapter, how can we break that relationship? That Prabhupada.
He mentions the yoga system, that by discipline, we can take charge of the situation by basically practicing yoga and disciplining ourselves and withdrawing the mind from sense objects and fixing it on Krishna, which is the essence of yoga.
That is a good method. Yeah, that's the essence of yoga. That there is still a different answer on it. Maybe Mother Lalita Priya Mai knows it.
Maharaj, is like we discussed about the bamboo sticks in the forest.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Bamboo sticks, that is the source of generating fire, and the fire destroys its own existence, like which is the forest of bamboo. So
Right.
when we engage our mind in the Lord, so this removes both the gross and subtle body.
Yes. Now, finally, we will come to that point by purifying the mind, the intelligence. But from the Jnana position, we will hear later more about that. These senses, these sense objects, and the mind are both material. And Amsavatar will say, just you have to reject both. Then that's the point. We have nothing to do with this mind. And this mind and these sense objects, that cannot be broken. They are connected. But you have to get out of the whole system and get out of it by devotional service. So that's interesting. We will hear about that more. So the point is now described in point. This is answered in the text, the first text we will read. There, that you have to give up both the material mind and its objects. The material mind is the material mind. By spiritualizing the mind, it's solved. But you have a material mind, then these material desires are there, and that connection is made, and the passion, that. So we will now read the first text. Sharing. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Shiva Naruttanam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jamudirayat. Nastabhayasya Bhattyasu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavatu Tamasloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistike. Gunesu Savisakshitam Abhikshnam Guna Sevaya Gunasasita Prabhava Matrupa Upayam Chayat. So you have the word Sita Prabhava. Sita Prabhava, within the mind existing prominently. This word Prabhava has nothing to do with my name. My name is not Prabhava, it's Prabhav. It's another meaning. Prabhav means power, influence. That's different. Translation. A person who have thus achieved me by understanding, oh, I'm I'm too active. Can someone read the translation, please? It's better we do it together.
A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and its objects. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Should I read the purport?
No,
No.
just a moment. So this is the realization of one who has realized his position as a servant of Krishna. Here. He gives up both the material mind and his objects. Why is it difficult to separate the material mind from its objects? Because the material mind considers itself to be the doer and the enjoyer of everything. That's the material mind. So giving up the material mind does not mean giving up all mental activities. That's something else. So we don't reject the mind completely. We have to disinfect the mind from its material tendencies. So it means purifying the mind and engaging one's mentality in devotional service of the Lord. I see. Good. My camera is coming down. Just a moment. Okay, that's good. That's still there. The fall down of my camera. Good. So it means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. So without surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord, just renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. So that's important. Therefore, the four Kumaras, they are in this process of liberation, and they struggle with that point because they don't, one needs knowledge of devotional service. One must practice devotional service, which is higher. And that it's interesting, we may remember that even Brahma could not understand the answer on this question. He could not understand. That's it. And then Hamsa Avatar has to come to answer this question. So, but that's the answer. That without surrendering to the lotus feet of Krishna, just renunciation alone, getting liberation, cannot take one out of this material world. Just as the sun rays are part of the sun, the living entities are part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when the living entity is completely absorbed in his identity as the part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes actually wise and easily gives up the material mind and sense objects. And then at the end, the word matrupa in this verse indicates absorption of the mind in the form, qualities, pastimes, and associates of the Supreme Lord. Here. So, read the last part. Immersed in such ecstatic meditation, one should render devotional service to the Lord, and this will automatically drive away the influence of sense gratification. By himself, the living entity does not have the potency to give up his false identification with material mind and sense objects. But by worshipping the Lord in the mood of being his eternal part and parcel, one is infused with the Lord's potency, which easily drives away the darkness of ignorance. So can someone read the purport of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, please?
Giving them both up is difficult. The consciousness remains in the sense objects by impressions, made firm by repeatedly serving the sense objects without a beginning. How will it be possible for you to give up the sense objects? The sense objects repeatedly remain in the consciousness by impressions. They remain there at all times. How is it possible to give up such consciousness? However, it is not necessary for jnanis to endure such difficulty in giving up both. The jnani who absorbs himself in me gives up both. Because the devotees fixed on service to me as the highest goal become absorbed in my form, qualities, pastimes, and rasa, the sense objects naturally withdraw from the consciousness. It is not difficult to give them up, but jnanis do not desire to absorb their minds in me.
That's the problem, yeah. That's the problem of the 4 Kumaras. So, that's the answer on our question. A crucial question, which is discussed here. Please remember that is most useful for our own practice and for preaching also. Text 27. Shagat svapa susuptam cha gunato buddhi vrittaya tasam vilakshano jiva saksitvena vinishitai. Someone read the translation, please.
Waking, sleeping, and deep sleep are the 3 functions of the intelligence and are caused by the modes of material nature. The living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these 3 states and thus remain as a witness to them.
So what this verse is, yes, we are so-called awake, we are sleeping, we have deep sleep, but we know we had deep sleep when we are rested. So we are the witness. We know these things. So who is that entity who knows these things? It knows that we are different from these experiences. So it's a very subtle point, but an important one. Can someone read the purport, please?
The spirit soul actually has nothing to do with the material world, having no permanent or natural relationship with it. Real renunciation means to give up the illusory identification with matter in its subtle and gross forms. So Shuptam, or deep sleep, indicates sleeping without any dreams or conscious activity. These 3 states are described by Lord Krishna as follows. Sattva jagaranam vidya rajasa swapnam adishet praswapnam tamasa jantos turiyam trishu santatam. One should know that wakefulness is born of the mode of goodness, dreams from the mode of passion, and deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. The 4th element, pure consciousness, is different from these 3 and pervades them. Bhagavatam 11:25-20. Real freedom means sakshitvena, or to exist as a witness to the functions of illusion. Such an advantageous position is achieved by development of Krishna consciousness.
Yes. So the living entity itself is not under control of the 3 modes of material nature. Is not under control of the spirit soul. That's not possible. Is simply a witness. This is a deep point. We are simply a witness. So we need to come to the 4th level of consciousness, which is Krishna consciousness, and witness how we are dreaming. We need to give up our misconceptions, our dream world. Text 20. Oh, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Yeah, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes 11:25-20 of the Bible time. So one should know that wakefulness is born of the mode of goodness. The mode of goodness, wakefulness. Dreams from the mode of passion. And deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. And the fourth element, pure consciousness, is different from these three and pervades them. It's polluted. Yes. Thus, the gunas are the cause of the three states of intelligence or consciousness. The jiva is different from them. It is without these three states. Why? It is confirmed that it is the mere witness of these states. Very important.
Maharaj, what is the meaning of deep, sleepless?
Yeah.
What is the meaning of deep, dreamless sleep?
Yeah, you have these three stages, Jagrata, Svapna, and Susupti. And Susupti is when you sleep but you are not dreaming. And then you get then the subtle body gets rest. So the gross body must rest. Okay, we sleep, and you may dream, but still the gross body rests. But the subtle body also needs rest. Therefore you need deep sleep. And in deep sleep, by the mercy of the super soul, then the intelligence and the mind is rejuvenated, gets power. That if you don't have deep sleep during the night, you don't feel rested the next day. We need deep sleep. Mostly the susupti, the dream state, appears just we wake up and so on. But those who cannot get deep sleep, they get mental problems. If you cannot sleep, you get mad. So that balance is important. Mother Prabhupada Priya, please enlighten us.
Not specifically in relation to Pavitra question, but in relation to this verse, that I was just thinking that because it's saying that the soul remains as the observer. And so what are we observing? It seems that we're observing the way the three modes of nature are influencing our bodies and minds. And yet we're realizing that although these things are happening to our subtle and gross coverings, it's nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, transcendence doesn't mean that, your mind is not influenced by the modes anymore. I mean, that's what it seems to be saying. It's just that when you might still feel, anger or, passion, some, products of passion and ignorance, but you just know that those feelings are not your own. They're just impositions by the modes on your subtle body, basically.
Yeah.
Correct?
That is correct, but we spoke about the mode of goodness. It's not that everyone realizes that he is a witness. When you come to the mode of goodness, then you start to realize. In the mode of passion and ignorance, you identify with the mind and the subtle body, and you don't realize you are an observer. But when we come to the mode of goodness, and we start to practice Krishna consciousness, then you get purified from passion and ignorance, and you get the power not to identify with these modes, and you see them happening, And then we have verse 270 of Bhagavad Gita. You remember? As oceans go into the, as rivers enter into the ocean,
Yeah, I
ocean
was
is
thinking
not,
of that one.
it's not influenced. So then the devotee sees all these material desires come in my mind, and he observes them and say, oh, these are material desires. Oh, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, if I go after that, I will suffer. I don't want it. And it goes away. But only devotees have that power. Non-devotees have not that power. And they are fully conditioned. So that's a big difference between devotees and non-devotees that we can understand here. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, Maharaj, that's kind of, yeah, that's where I was going. I was actually thinking of that verse, that because sometimes we think transcendental means that you're not influenced, like you're just not touched by any external influences, but it's not that they don't come, but you just kind of see them and you choose not to indulge in them and you just go forward with your service.
But I don't have my verse book with me. It's all too much to carry all these books while I'm traveling. But there is a verse in the Bhagavatam that said the materialistic people, they cannot understand how devotees become free from this influence of passion and ignorance, how they can control their senses. They cannot understand this. But here it is explained why this is happening. Good. You have to go on a bit because many verses to come. Yari samsvi bando yam atmanaguna vrittida maito yestito jayat jagastat gunasheta sham. Can someone read the translation?
The spirit soul is trapped in the bondage of material intelligence, which awards him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. But I am the fourth stage of consciousness, beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind.
Thank you, Ashipam. Can you also read a small purport for us?
Lord Krishna now specifically answers the questions that the sages originally placed before Lord Brahma. Ultimately, the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material sense objects and modes of nature. But because of one's false identification with the material body, the modes of nature are empowered to engage one in illusory occupations. By destroying this false identification with matter, the soul gives up the illusory occupations avoided by the modes of nature. It is clearly stated in these words that the living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion, but must situate himself in Krishna consciousness in full awareness of the Supreme Lord.
Yeah. So becoming situated in me, Krishna says here, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. So because of one's false identification with the material body, the modes of nature are empowered to engage one in illusory occupations. So we are empowering the modes to influence us because we identify with the body. That gives the power to material nature. So it is clearly stated in this verse that a living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion. He must situate himself in Krishna consciousness, in full awareness of the Supreme Lord. So again, that point comes up. We are not conditioned, and we are not liberated, and we are not a mind. Important points. So we cannot free ourselves only by knowledge, also not by knowledge, by jnana. No. Bhaunam jnanamante jnanmama papachati. that so after many births, the jnani understands Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Krishna is everything, and he surrenders. And Saha Mahatma Sudurlabha. So such a person is very rare. Now we have 29. Ahankara kritam bandham atmano rita viparyayam vitvani vityam samsara shintam tuyustitas tyayat. Someone can read the translation, please.
The false ego of the living entity places him in bondage and awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness.
That is heavy. The false ego of the living entity and place him in bondage. That's the first thing. And then you get exactly the opposite from what you desire. So every action, material action, that is what you get. Therefore become intelligent, Krishna says. Give up this anxiety to enjoy and exploit material nature and to become the Lord of everything that surveys, that so Sridhar Swami has a commentary here. Can someone read the purport? We are going to hear Sridhar Swami's commentary.
Srila Sridhar Swami comments as follows. How does material existence cause the bondage of living entity, and how can such bondage can be given up? The Lord explains this here by the word ahankara kritam. Because of false ego, one is bound up in the network of illusion. Artha viprayayam indicates that although the living entity desires blissful life, eternity, and knowledge, he adopts procedures that actually cover his eternal blissful nature and give him exactly the opposite result. The living entity does not want death and suffering, but these are actually the results of material existence, which is therefore useless for all practical purposes. An intelligent person should contemplate the unhappiness of material life and thus become situated in transcendental Lord. The word samsara chintam can be understood as follows. Samsara or material existence indicates the material intelligence because material existence only occurs because of the living entity's false intellectual identification with the material world. Because of this misidentification, one becomes overwhelmed with samsara chittam, anxiety to enjoy the material world. One should become situated in the Lord and give up such useless anxiety.
So, essentially is, material intelligence only occurs because of the living entity's false intellectual identification with the material world. 30. Yavananachta depumso nani varteta yuktavi shagartap apisvapamahya svapne jagaranam yata. Translation, someone can read the translation.
According to my instructions, one should fix the mind on me alone. If, however, one continues to see many different values and goals in life rather than seeing everything within me, then, although apparently awake, one is actually dreaming due to incomplete knowledge, just as one dream that one has waking from a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. If one continues to see many different values and goals in life. So if the goal is not to serve Krishna but something else, and one does not see Krishna in this world, because that was a point made before that in text 25. There it is said, you are seeing the coverings, not the reality. That the reality is, we are spirit soul, not from this world, but you see the coverings and you think the coverings, that's the reality. Then, yeah, you are apparently awake, but to be spiritually awake means come out of this dream. And give up your attraction from the temporary by connecting ourselves with Krishna and by seeing only Krishna in this world. So that was text 30. So one who is not Krishna conscious, he cannot understand that everything is resting within Lord Krishna. And thus it is impossible for him to retire from sense gratification. So that's the essence here. I repeat it. One who is not Krishna conscious cannot understand that everything is resting within Lord Krishna. Everything is connected with Lord Krishna. Everything is coming from Krishna. Everything is controlled by Krishna. And that it is impossible to retire from sense gratification. 31. Asattva tatmano nyesam bhavanam tatkita bida katayoitavasasya vrishasvapna drishoyata. Translation, please.
Those states of existence that are conceived of as separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no actual existence, although they create a sense of separation from the Absolute Truth. Just as the seer of the dream imagines many different activities and rewards, similarly, because of the sense of an existence separate from the Lord's existence, the living entity falsely performs fruitive activities, thinking them to be the cause of future rewards and destinations.
Mm-hmm. The sense of existence separate from the Lord. Therefore we perform all these activities. So in the purport, there Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Varnashram is based on illusion. And therefore, a self-realized soul is not obliged to follow Varnashram. That's the essence of this purport. But Mother Kasturka, I will come to you immediately, but I want to show first another verse which says the same. And that's the second verse of the Bhagavatam Chatusloka. Iteritam yat pratyetana pratyete satmana tadvidyatmano mayam yatavaso yatatamaha. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality, nor it has my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. So it means that, but everything has a relationship with Krishna, but if we don't see that relationship, it's illusion. So this verse says the same thing. That yes, let's go back to the text. Kasturka, you wanted to ask something.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Here, although intellectually we are getting the point that we should not have this separatism from the Lord, but surrounded by the circumstances and the people around us, we are always put back into the same idea. So, how do we bridge from where we are now to what we have to become?
Well, no, this Mother Sita Rani presented us this seminar on competition with Krishna. That last Saturday, I gave a class somewhere, and I used her slides. That was nice. And she speaks about it in her seminar. She says, yes, Paundaka was kept into illusion by all these ministers. And then they always sing, yes, you are God, you are the greatest, you are Bhagavan. And then the next question was, do we have association that keeps us in illusion? And the answer is yes. All those who surround us, usually in this world, they are keeping us in illusion, unless the advanced devotee. So we should keep association with devotees as much as possible. And be sure they will help us to keep ourselves out of illusion, sometimes heavy, but yes, that's the point. Get association with those who are out of illusion and don't leave them. Of course, may not always be practical to do that directly. May take some time, I think. But it's good to focus on that. You can associate by reading Srila Prabhupada's books and so on. Mother Prabhupada, Priya, please.
Raj, how do we know if we've actually woken up?
Woken up. Yeah, you have woken up when you stop suffering and feel happy, blissful. That's when you are woken up. If you are still suffering from this and that, then that is Krishna helping you to wake up. Because some devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, will Krishna test us? And Srila Prabhupada said, yes. And the devotee asked then, and will Krishna give us more and more heavy tests? And Srila Prabhupada said, no. Once you pass the test, you pass the test. So when you pass the test, we are waking up. But we have to pass the test first. And as long as we are not passing the test, Krishna will try to wake us up by this suffering, by all these things. Good.
Thank you, Raj.
We go to text 32. Can someone read 32, please?
While awake, the living entity enjoys with all of his senses the fleeting characteristic of the material body and mind. While dreaming, he enjoys similar experiences within the mind, and in deep, dreamless sleep, all such experiences merge into ignorance. By remembering and contemplating the succession of wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep, the living entity can understand that he is one throughout the three stages of consciousness and is transcendental. Thus, he becomes the Lord of the senses.
Yeah, so the living entity is actually the Lord of the senses and the mind, although temporarily he has become a victim under their influence. But by Krishna consciousness, one may assume one's rightful position as master of mental and sensory faculties. Since a living entity can remember his experiences in the 3 stages of consciousness, he is ultimately the experiencing agent or seer of all the phases of consciousness. So this universal experience can be understood by everyone. Everyone can understand this point. And thus everyone can understand that one's actual identity is separate from the material body and mind. Text 33. Someone read, please, the translation.
You should consider how, by the influence of my illusory energy, these 3 states of mind caused by the modes of nature, having been artificially imagined to exist in me, having definitely ascertained the truth of the soul, you should utilize the sharpened sword of knowledge acquired by logic, reflections, and from the instructions of sages and Vedic literatures to completely cut off the false ego, which is the breeding ground of all doubts. All of you should then worship me, who am situated within the heart.
So I should cut it with this, with knowledge. Knowledge comes from Shastra. Shastra is also a weapon. So one should cut the false ego and worship Lord Krishna. False ego is the breeding ground of all doubts. But by devotional service, all doubts can be removed. What is by devotional service, this is going to happen. By devotional service, devotion service, Srimad Bhagavatam 11.242, you heard it. Bprs, Bhava, Virakti, and so on. Devotion, direct experience, and detachment occur simultaneously. Can someone read a small purport here, this verse?
One who has obtained transcendental knowledge is no longer dependent on the 3 stages of ordinary consciousness, namely waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. Thus one thus rids one's material mind of tendency to become the enjoyer of the inferior energy of the Lord, and one sees everything as part and parcel of the Lord's potency, meant only for the enjoyment of the Lord himself. In such a state of consciousness, one naturally surrenders fully to the Lord's devotional service, which Lord Hamsa here advises the sons of Lord Brahma to take up.
Yes, 34. Can someone read 34, please?
One should see that the material world is a distinct illusion appearing in the mind, because material objects have an extremely flickering existence and are here today and gone tomorrow. They can be compared to the streaking red line created by whirling a fiery stick. The spirit soul by nature exists in a single state of pure consciousness. However, in this world, he appears in many different forms and stages of existence. The modes of nature divide the soul's consciousness into normal wakefulness, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. All such varieties of perception, however, are actually Maya and exist only like a dream.
Mm-hmm. That's not easy to understand, so can someone read the purple, please?
The Lord now describes an additional process for transcending the illusory interaction of the material mind and material sense objects. Lasa means jumping or dancing, and thus manaso vilasam, here indicates that the material mind is jumping superficially from one conception of life to another. Our original consciousness, however, is one, Vijnanam Ekam. Therefore, one should carefully study the flickering here today, gone tomorrow nature of the material world and detach oneself from the illusory variety of Maya.
Here today, gone tomorrow. Yes. Dus, the verse purport here of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj, who says, when the remembrance of Krishna's pastimes is awakened in the heart of a living entity, his propensity for enjoyment or renunciation is destroyed, and his propensity for eternal service to the Supreme Lord is awakened. That his propensity for enjoyment or renunciation, both, is destroyed. That then you get out of it this attachment and aversion to the material world. 35. Can someone read?
Having thus understood the temporary, illusory nature of material things, and thus having pulled one's vision away from illusion, one should remain without material desires. By experiencing the happiness of the soul, one should give up material speaking and activities. If someone
Sometimes
must observe the material world, one
Sometimes.
No, some message was there, so I was distracted by reading that message. One should remember that it is not ultimate reality, and therefore one has give it up. By such constant remembrance, up till the time of death, one will not again fall into illusion.
Yeah, that is a kind of meditation by Sankhya Yoga. So remain without material desires. Remember, that's the first thing, remain without material desires. And then remember that the material world is not the ultimate reality, and therefore give it up. By constant remembrance up to the time of death, one will not again fall into illusion. So that's the practice of the jnanis. That's not directly for the devotees. But they say by constant remembrance up to the time of death, one will not fall into a disillusion. So remembrance of two things. I should not have material desires, and the world is not the ultimate reality. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explained, the purport from the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So one will not fall into the material illusion if one constant remembrance it is not ultimate reality. 2, by enjoying spiritual bliss within himself. 3, retire from material activities of the mind, speech, of body. So that's the practice of this jnanis. But it is much more easier to practice Krishna consciousness. So one should search for spiritual bliss, yes, but through the devotional service of the Lord. By gradually developing one's spiritual body, one will no longer desire to enjoy anything within the material world. And if one comes to that point, that one has developed this one spiritual body, how does one act? That's the next verse. The next verse. Can someone read? This is an analogy we may remember.
Just as a drunken man does not notice if he is wearing his coat or shirt, similarly one who is perfect in self-realization and who has thus achieved his eternal identity does not notice whether the temporary body is sitting or standing. Indeed, if by God's will the body is finished, or if by God's will he obtains a new body, a self-realized soul does not notice. just as a drunken man does not notice the situation of his outward dress.
It is like a drunken man. So Krishna conscious person who has achieved his spiritual identity does not accept sense gratification as the goal of life. And he's unaware of his outward dress. The gopis, they had forgotten their bodies, themselves. So a self-realized person is constantly engaged in the service of the Lord and knows that the temporary body and flickering mind are material. That's not so serious. By superior intelligence and Krishna consciousness, he remains engaged in the Lord's service. So a liberated soul does not, however, inflict punishment on the body, but rather remains neutral, naturally accepting his destiny as the will of the Supreme. So, and now there is an important point here in the commentary. A liberated soul has already achieved his spiritual body, and therefore knows that his continued existence does not depend on the material body. That is the realization we need. Once we have that if you know you are not going to die, you will continue your existence, and it does not depend on this gross and subtle body. That's real liberation. The commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, which is on the screen. Can someone read that commentary, please?
Two verses describe the state of the person who has perfected Jnana, who is Jivan Mukta. He does not pay attention when he has risen from his seat or sits down again, because he has attained realization of Brahman, Swarupa. An example is given. A drunken person is not aware if he is wearing or not wearing clothing.
Yes. Thank you. Text 37. Can someone read the translation, please?
The material body certainly moves under the control of supreme destiny and therefore must continue to live long with the senses and vital air as long as one's karma is in effect. A self-realized soul, however, who's awakened to the absolute reality and who's thus highly situated in the perfect stage of yoga, will never again surrender to the material body and its manifold manifestations, knowing it to be just like a body visualized in a dream.
That's quite a realization at text 37. Yes. A perfect yogi will never surrender to the material body. So one should patiently wait until the chain of one's previous fruitive works has completely exhausted itself. At the time, the body will automatically die according to destiny. So one who is highly elevated in Krishna consciousness never again surrenders to the illusory identification with the material body, which is just like the body in a dream. 38. Can someone read 38, please?
My dear Brahmanas, I have now explained to you the confidential knowledge of Sankhya, by which one philosophically distinguishes matter from spirit, and of Ashtanga Yoga, by which one links up with the Supreme. Please understand that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, and that I have appeared before you, desiring to explain your actual religious duties.
So here Krishna actually says formally, I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That Vishnu. We have here Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, and there it speaks about use of intelligence. Very important. Can someone read that, please?
The Lord reveals his identity in order that they gain faith. Sankhya means distinguishing Atma and non-Atma. Yoga means Ashtanga Yoga. I have come with a desire to teach Dharma. It should be understood that Hamsa also taught about Varnashram duties, Dharma. This teaching is referred to later in speaking about the duties of Varnashram. Purakila Mahabho Dharmam Parama Kam Prabhu Tena Hamsa Rupena Brahmana Yatha Madhava. O Lord, Almighty Armed One, previously in your form of Hamsa, you spoke to Brahma, whose dharma that bring supreme happiness to the practitioner. 11, Srimad Bhagavatam 11:17:3.
Yes. So it's the highest happiness. So we have to use our intelligence, observe our consciousness. That is the message in the last verses. Text 39. Can someone read, please?
O best of the Brahmanas, please know that I am the supreme shelter of the yoga system, analytic philosophy, virtuous action, truthful religious principles, power, beauty, fame, and self-control.
Yes, thank you. So that was 39. Krishna is the shelter of all these things. Yes. 40. Can someone read text 40?
All superior. Continue. Go on.
Carry on, Prabhu, carry on.
Read.
All superior transcendental qualities, such as being beyond the modes of nature, detached, the well-wisher, the most dear, the super soul, equally situated everywhere and free from material entanglement, all such qualities, free from the transformations of material qualities, find their shelter and worshipable object in me.
Yes. So all qualities of the Lord are transcendental, but now this is Vishwanath Chakravarti's commentary. Can someone read this commentary, please?
When you say that you are the supreme shelter of power and fame, we see that you also show identification with the body. How have you taught us knowledge by doing that? True, I do not have a material body different from myself as the jiva has. It has no ahankar made of prakriti. It arises from my swarup and is full of eternity, knowledge and bliss. That is explained in this verse. All qualities take shelter of me, who am beyond the gunas of Maya. I am not dependent on the qualities of Maya, nirapeksham, but I work for the benefit of my devotees since I am controlled by their priyam, and show affection for them. According to Igupadhagya Priya Kiraka Panini 135, Priya means one who pleases. What are the qualities? I am equal to all since I am indifferent to material things and I am attached, asanga, to my devotees who are spiritual entities. The word Adi indicates the unlimited qualities such as truthfulness and cleanliness, which are mentioned in the first canto by the earth personified. Sridhar Swami says that Aguna means that the Lord has a form whose qualities do not change. Those qualities are eternal. In the first canto, it is said, Ite chane cha bhagavan nitya yatra mahaguna prarthaya mahatvam ichchadbhina viyanti sma karhichit. In the Lord reside the following eternal great qualities which do not disappear at any time. Bhagavatam 1:16-31. Thus the qualities arising from the Lord's Swarup belong to the Swarup of the Lord, Atma Nam. Shruti say, Shakti vividhaiva shruyate swabhaviki jnana bal kriya cha. The Lord has many spiritual energies, such as the energy of Gyan, Bal, and Kriya. Shvetashvatara Upanishad.
Thank you. 41. Lord Krishna continued, My dear Uddhava, thus all the doubts of the sages headed by Sanak were destroyed by my words. Fully worshipping me, with transcendental love and devotion, they chanted my glories with excellent hymns. The greatest of the sages, headed by Saunaka Rishi, thus perfectly worshipped and glorified me. As Lord Brahma looked on, I returned to my abode. So the substance and foundational relationship with everything is Krishna. Is the substance that this world is a shadow of the substance, but we have to see the substance, which is a foundational relationship with Krishna. And then all these issues discussed in this chapter, like the sense objects entering the mind and so on, that will be solved. So we are at the end of this chapter, and let's see what's the time now. It's now 4:11. So we will resume at, let's say, 4:25. We have a break and then we will have questions. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Hare Krishna.
Recording in progress.
So we heard this knowledge with some very practical tips that as a drunken man, you may remember the 24 gurus which you have discussed. And we discussed the arrow maker. He was making an arrow and he was so concentrated on making the arrow. He was sitting in his shop and the king passed by and all those following. And he was not just aware of the whole thing. He only saw the arrow. So as a drunken man is not aware whether he wears clothes or not, so he's not aware of the body. Always so deeply Krishna conscious that we heard about the practices of the Sankhya Yogi, constant remembering Krishna, constant remembering, not Krishna, they don't remember Krishna, but they are constantly remembering that what they see in this world is not the ultimate reality, and they want the bliss of feeling the Atma. And then by that spiritual bliss, they retire from material activities. They stop all material activities, even the speech and so on. Of course, it's more easier if one is Krishna conscious. That we heard about methods, how to use your intelligence and to get knowledge and attachment. That's, But we can not free ourselves just by knowledge. only by surrendering. And we heard that we need to come to the fourth level of consciousness, Krishna consciousness, and that we are the witness of the three other states of consciousness. So and we need to give up our misconception. So we heard about the realization of one who has realized his position as a servant of Krishna. By that, giving up both the material mind and its objects. So giving up the material mind does not mean giving up mental activity. It means purifying the mind and get out the wrong mentality to identify as a part of this material world. So, Pavitra Prabhu, what's the news?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, the news is,
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your wonderful explanation.
It's not mine.
Yes, Maharaj, I want to refer you to I want to refer you to text 36.
36.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Translation.
The drunken man. You can read the translation.
Yes. Yes. The drunken man we see in this Bhagavatam, Jad Bharat. And Rishabhadev. They were all behaving in a transcendental form, but they were not drunkards.
No, they were not drunkards. That's true. That's
so.
Yeah. That of course there are different levels of spiritual realization that factually when one identifies with the spiritual body, then one can really forget the gross body. That but yes, a drunken man is here explained not that in the sense that one is intoxicated, but a drunken man is not aware of his of whether he wears clothes or not, and so a self-realized person is not aware of the body anymore, although he's still in the body. He's Jivan Mukta, but he does not identify with the body. And what's the proof of that? When you are at that level, you are not suffering anymore. You don't perceive any suffering. The suffering is perceived by false ego within the subtle body through the mind. But that's gone, that suffering, because there's no false ego anymore. So these are very high levels here. That is a Jivan Mukti. He is unaware of his outward dress. That so means Chad Bharat, he had no awareness of his outside dress in that sense. He was Chad, he was mad, because he didn't want to be in that bodily consciousness. That so, and what is another symptom is that one forgets about accepting sense gratification as the goal of life. Is always engaged in the service of the Lord, and he knows that this temporary body and the flickering mind are material. They are not so important. That So like, yeah, it is, he accepts when there is suffering of the body. He doesn't feel it, but he will not inflict suffering on the body. He accepts everything as a destiny of the Supreme Lord. So the point is here, a drunken man is one who has here achieved his spiritual body. He had achieved his spiritual body. He realized it. And he realizes after the end of this material body, I'm not, after the end of this body, material body, I just continue to exist because I'm already my spiritual body. So that's the point made here. It does not mean that a self-realized soul does not know anymore that he has a gross body, but his consciousness is not in the gross body. It's in his spiritual body. That it's like a covering, like you have a jacket, and he does not know, do I wear it or not? So that is what's described here. That does that help to understand that a bit better?
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
It's not an easy point to understand in our conditioned state, at least not for me. But yes, Mother Prabhupada, Priya.
It seems like in relation to this point that there's two levels of relating to the body that are described here. So one is as the observer, free from false ego, and the other is unawareness at all, just completely not aware of the body. And so I guess are these kind of equated, or is one higher than the other?
That's an interesting point. Yeah, so that, of course, seeing oneself as the observer is a jnani practice. But then you have the jnani liberation. We know that is an incomplete liberation. That but the devotees who are fully absorbed in devotional service, they forget their outer body. They forget their outer body because they are so absorbed in their service, they forget about the body. And that's really what's mentioned here. That the jnanis, they have to cultivate awareness of the Atma. But that is incomplete. It's incomplete, and they remain, and that's their practice, seeing oneself of the observer. But for seeing oneself of the observer, for a devotee means something else. The devotee sees how Krishna does everything in this world, how he is not a doer, only desiring. So these are differences between jnanis and devotees, and I think one can interpret these verses from both perspectives, and that, these are different angles of vision.
Yeah, Mars, that's interesting because I was also thinking that, from the Jnani point of view, the body is, just matter, and it's, created by the modes of material nature. It's always changing, and ultimately it's going to be finished. So it's kind of useless. So their idea is, disconnect from the body, stop all material activities. But for devotees, the body is not useless because we engage our senses in the service of the Lord. So the body is very valuable because it's the instrument by which we can serve Krishna in this world.
Yeah.
Then, whereas, this drunken man analogy is great for jnanis, not being aware of your body, but for devotees, since the body is actually a valuable thing, although temporary, but it's, apyadruva martadam, although it's temporary, but it's very valuable because in human form we can actually use our bodies to serve Krishna. So then devotees, then there's some usefulness in being aware of the situation of our bodies and maintaining our bodies nicely, our health, and like that, so that we can serve Krishna.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, but still for devotees you have also different levels like the level of the Bprs in Mahabhav, they forget about the body. It's some way or other it's maintained that, but for us who are still conditioned, this body is very valuable. We can use it in Krishna's service and we must maintain it nicely. Because and you have to be concerned about maintaining it nicely, because it's Krishna's property. Then they asked me to go to New Mayapur in September, and I said no, I can't go, because a few days before I have a cataract operation on my other eye, and after that I need to rest. I must take care, and you cannot travel right after that. So you have to take care. That's because I'm a conditioned soul. I'm still aware of the body. But in the higher stages, that also there is once you surpass liberation, then as a devotee, you have the capacity to fully absorb in Krishna consciousness, in Krishna. But that does not mean you are always fully absorbed. You are also aware from the body sometimes. But that capacity is there. And so
I was thinking of the example of Prahlad Maharaj that we heard about, that he wasn't thinking about maintaining the body at all, because he had this relationship with Lord Nrsimhadev, or with the Lord, as like parental, like he's a child, like a child doesn't think what am I going to eat for dinner, or where am I going to sleep, because the parents take care of that. Doesn't need to even think about it.
Yeah, that's the one becomes carefree, but that's a high level. So we have to adapt. We should not imitate that if we are not on that level, because then some accident may happen. That's not good. Yeah, but we see these verses can be understood on different levels, the jnani level, the devotee level, and then on the devotee level even you can also understand it on different levels and different situations. So one who is a devotee who is not yet liberated, a devotee who is liberated, and a devotee who is in prema will be different. But the devotee in prema is described here as a drunken man, that because he loses his awareness of the material body. It's because we know in this is explained in Madhurya Kanambini. In the stage of bhava, there is still some slight awareness. A slight awareness of the body is still there. But once prema, it's gone. Then the purification is complete, on all levels. Different levels of completeness of anarthas are described in Madhurya Kanambini.
No one else has a question. I have another question.
Okay.
Because in the last chapter, we were it was mentioned the acts of transcendental knowledge, and that was mentioned also here in this section, the sword of knowledge. But at the end of the last chapter, it said that we need to throw away this axe, that the axe, having used it to cut off your attachment to false ego and this material existence, once you've cut it, then there's no more need for the axe. You just throw it. So my question is, what does it practically mean to throw away the acts of transcendental knowledge?
Well, once you have knowledge to achieve something, is knowledge to achieve liberation. After you have achieved liberation, is this knowledge still useful for you? No, not really, because you have achieved it. That then this knowledge is no use anymore. That you cannot preach in Vaikuntha to the residents of Vaikuntha the difference between the body and the soul. They will say, well, what's this? I didn't know that such a thing exists. That will be strange. That so then it has of no use anymore. We give it up at that time. That's the way I understand this. It has use up to the point of liberation. Therefore, devotional service is the means and the goal. But those who don't take to the means and the goal of the chanting of Hare Krishna and the devotional practices, these jnanis, they have this ardent practice to get liberation, and then, but once they get liberation, some of them even take a kind of devotional service, but without devotion, really, to get liberation. They use the practice of devotional service to get liberation, but they don't believe in Krishna, and then they give it up. After liberation, I don't need it anymore. So yes, that after you are liberated, you want to serve Krishna, not think about all this material world and etc. Yeah, and the difference and so on. Forget about it. That it's not of any use anymore. So
I guess my question is, like, how do we forget about it? Does it just become insignificant and it just kind of like fades into oblivion, or does kind of like Yoga Maya come and cover our knowledge, or how does it happen that we forget about it?
It's like the Vrajavasis, they forget that Krishna is God, because they want him, a more intimate relationship with him. But so it's not that they really completely forget, but it's going on the background. This is not important. Their relationship is Madhurya, that's what they want. So they have found something better, and it's going in the background. So that's the same thing in devotional service. Param dristvani vartate, and we forget about these lower things. That's natural. You forget about it. That it's something really we don't need to worry much about. That will happen like this, because we are so absorbed in bliss. Then this knowledge of liberation that looks like, what's the use? But for us it's very useful. It's supporting. It helps us to become awake here. This chapter that we went through, Because I'm always thinking, you hear this chapter, but how is that going to change my life? Try to become the observer, that's the message. But be the observer how Krishna does things, not in the Jnani way. That how Krishna is doing everything, and that everything is Krishna's energy. Then you see everywhere Krishna, and the problem is solved of the mind entering the sense objects. Because then the sense objects you see as Krishna, they enter the mind, so you see Krishna. It's gone. That's what I understand. Good. Thank you very much. Then our time is nearly over, and is there another question? Otherwise, we see each other tomorrow. That is in 1 hour. I'm traveling from Germany to Prague. I'm in the Singhachalam, beautiful Nrsimha temple. Yet got darshan this morning, and now we are going to
Please post the pictures, Maharaj.
to Prague. Yeah, I'll see. I can take a picture before I leave if I get a chance. So I'm going to Prague, and that's the home of Nitai Navadvipa Chandra. That beautiful Vishnu deities and very active devotees there. Good. Hare Krishna, Jai Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Maharaj.
Recording
Hare
stopped.
Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Bo.